Welcome to the Hustings, the debate for the National Students' Council's representatives on the National Grooming Policy. This policy has returned to focus recently with the new Minister of Educational Transformation saying that he intends to review it. We've had, as a result, the discourse from the teachers' unions saying that it needs to be reviewed, that it is responsible for the indiscipline in schools. We've had the parents' representatives saying that it is not responsible. We've had the Pan-Africanists and others talking about the colonial bent of our system and the need to get away from that, and that the grooming policy was a step away from this colonialism. This afternoon, these young people who live with this grooming policy every day will say to us what their views are and what they intend to do about this grooming policy, what they would like to see about it. Each candidate will be allowed 5 minutes to put their position on the table. And I want to begin by stressing the most important line in the grooming policy, which stated at the very beginning that students were first and foremost to wear the uniform of their school with pride and to reflect the culture of their school and their pride and understanding in their school. That was the opening tenet of the grooming policy. The order has already been decided, and I'm going to invite the first person to give their views. Each candidate will speak for 5 minutes, and then we will move. At the end of that 5 minutes, at the end of those deliberations, we will then have a brief open dialogue. I'm now going to call on Ms. Aaliyah Mapp of the Allen School to put her position.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Mapp, attending the Allen School and running for the position of General Secretary. It is a pleasure to be before you to speak on a matter that has attracted interest and debate throughout our schools, the National Grooming Policy. As teachers, parents, and students, we all have an integral role to play in the future of education in Barbados. The grooming policy is an attempt to impart values of cleanliness, decency, respect, and modesty, values which help to create the discipline and order that the procedure for success in our schools and ultimately the society. The public's attitude towards the grooming policy and violence in schools reflects a mix of support for organization and fear of mounting challenges. The grooming policy, which was introduced in 2023, is aimed at the promotion of cleanliness, modesty, and respect among students, while still offering some type of self-communication according the students' culture. It has been locally accepted as a way of maintaining discipline and a sense of identity within schools. However, controversy still exists over balancing these standards with students' individuality. Violence and acts of deviance within schools, however, remain an ongoing concern. Reports highlight concerns about disruptive behavior and threats to safety. Solutions to manage such issues are programs aimed to reducing isolation among students and ensuring a safer school environment. For example, conflict resolutions workshops and conflict boot camp. As a student, I can say that the grooming policy is fair, as I can tend to my hair easily and have the responsibility to follow the rules and regulations to carry myself well as a student. While many may disagree with the grooming policy about uniforms and they're here to get a chance to express themselves. However, many students do not wear their braids neatly done, and it begins to attract a distinctive odor. While wearing the uniform incorrectly, for example, with the zip down, the shirt out of the pants or dress, and wearing jewelry even though it is a school rule. Many students are rude to teachers because of their lack of discipline when teachers are addressing this issue to them. Many students listen to violent gang-affiliated music using curse words, and this music makes the students feel as though they are gang members and I quote, bad men. Little boys pretending to be men. A young boy who was only 13 years old was shot and killed by a stray bullet, which was fired by a 15-year-old boy. Why should a 15-year-old boy have a gun? A 15-year-old boy who is still in school. Now think about if that boy had brought that school into a school organization. The more violence students see and hear, then more will they want to partake in it. The children in this country, including me, who feel afraid to walk home or to the shop, not because of how their hair looks, like forgetting to comb their hair, violence lives among us. Hair does not pull a trigger, but violent and encouraged people do. Children should not have this issue. I have acknowledged that we discussed the grooming policy more than the violence slipping into our school, students' minds, and streets. The grooming policy is not taken seriously by students, and with this, students are taking their self-expression in the wrong way. Students are getting out of hand with the amount of expression given, and I believe the ministry should be rethink the grooming policy if students will take it for granted. My response as a student representative, as a Barbados National Student Council elect star candidate to the grooming policy would focus on balancing the policy's goals and concerns of the students as they might emphasize the importance of fostering discipline and respect while advocating for students' individuality. It also forces me to focus on how the policy encourages discipline, respect, and unity among students, which are important values in fostering a productive educational environment. The Ministry of Education Transformation has clarified that the national grooming policy is intended to promote a sense of cleanliness among the students, but still reserves a space for self-expression. The policy is to apply that all students attending public and private schools and will have standards for clothing, hairstyles, and behavior. The Ministry of Education Transformation also reiterated that the policy was developed collaboratively by the stakeholders, the principal and educators who are their primary stakeholders. On the other hand, the policy has been praised for fostering discipline and a sense of identity within schools. It encourages students to take pride in their appearance and aligns with the broader goals and creating a respectful and orderly learning environment. However, some critics argue that the policy may be inadvertently suppress individuality and self-display, sparking debates about the balance between informality and personal identity. The public's attitude towards the grooming policy and violence in school. Yeah. I believe the ministry should rethink the grooming policy if students will take it for granted.
Thank you, Aisha. Aliyah, sorry. Now call on Chelsea, who is running for president from the Allen School.
Good afternoon, everyone. The topic today is the National Grooming Policy of Barbados and its effects on student discipline and school violence. The first question one may ask is, what is a grooming policy? A grooming policy is a set of rules or guidelines set in place to maintain order and elegance among the stakeholders of an organization. For example, When you visit Dodds Prison, you have to be suitably attired to enter the compound, due to the standards set by this organization. Now we move on to speak about the grooming policy set in place for the students of Barbados. The policy isn't just to address here school uniforms or accessories, while also tackling the basics. It also helps create structure within our school system. These policies are linked to ideas of order, discipline, and control, but we have to ask, are they helping or are they hurting? In the average school system, we all know schools need structure in which rules and discipline are the core values. Without them, classrooms can be unkempt and learning may become difficult, and the students may not feel secure. But the real question is, do grooming policies really help with discipline, or are they taking away attention from more grave problems? I personally agree with the main ideas behind the grooming policy, such as its efforts to permit self-expression while upholding discipline within our school system. Nevertheless, I believe it could be improved by simplifying it, thus making it easier for students, parents, and teachers to understand. This will also help school administrations to apply the policy fairly. We have seen that students studying overseas learn and succeed without strict grooming rules, and this shows that being too focused on attire doesn't help or harm education in the way some people may think. Above all, the amount of attention this grooming debate has been receiving has detracted from bigger problems in our educational system. For example, school violence, teacher shortages, poor school infrastructure, and lack of sufficient resources. These are far more serious problems than certain infractions which students have been penalized for. According to Paula Anmore, spokesperson/coordinator of the Group of Concerned Parents Barbados, if anything is to be changed, it should be how the grooming policy is interpreted by students, teachers, and parents. I support her view. For example, some students wear exaggerated hairstyles that are not suitable for school. Moore also posits the view that the public backlash may be as a result of society being accustomed to tradition. Grooming policies in Barbados have outstandingly affected the educational climate by creating discussions around discipline, cultural identity, and student well-being. In traditional times, strict rules were biased against embracing natural black hairstyles, stimulating public backlash calls for reform. Therefore, the ministry implemented a revised grooming policy that helps promote self-expression and cultural pride. The public's point of view of the grooming policy is a 50-50 debate, due to the fact that the Barbados Union of Teachers, BUT, think that the policy is one of the biggest factors contributing to indiscipline, while parents agree that it is a more progressive step that promotes cultural identity without promoting disorder. Stakeholders in Barbados hold mixed feelings on the grooming policy's influence on the education climate. President of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Rudy Lavelle, also stated that the policy is flawed and also supports a policy review. The group of concerned parents defines it as a step forward to self-awareness in the youth while preparing them for the world of work. The Ministry of Educational Transformation has taken note of the public's concerns, and their goal is to find a common ground where our society will agree to. On Wednesday, April 2, 2025, the Minister of Educational Transformation, Senator the Honorable Chad Blackman, and Chief Education Officer Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw commented on the policy. The minister stated, "We need to settle on a middle ground that is fair and reflective of Barbadian identity." The aim is for the ministry and society to be able to agree on the grooming policy. As a student leader, I support a grooming policy that balances discipline with respect for cultural expression. The 2023 grooming policy was a positive change as it recognized our right to wear our natural hair proudly, showing who we are as young Barbadians. For many of us, our hair is more than just a look. It's a part of our culture, history, and how we express ourselves. I believe the policy should be improved and not removed. As a student just like you, I know what it feels like to want to be seen and respected, and that is why I am sitting here today for a change that includes all of us. In closing, grooming policy should never be about control for control's sake. They should reflect who we are as people, disciplined, proud, and expressive of our identity. The goal is not to remove structure, but to shape it into something that respects both tradition and progress. Let us remember the words of former South African President Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use it to change the world." Let us ensure that our policies support education not just in books, but in building respect, identity, and unity. Thank you.
Powerful words at the end, building respect, identity. I now ask Miss Jania Husbands of the Courage and Parry School to give her view.
Good afternoon to everyone. Today I will be sharing my point of view of the Barbados National School Grooming Policy and its role in shaping student behavior and school violence. The grooming policy aims to promote discipline, modesty, respect, cleanliness, neatness, and to somewhat give the student some self-expression. This system outlines expectations for how students should present themselves. Some people ask, is grooming truly linked to discipline and reducing violence? This question is a valid argument that a well-groomed student body reflects order and helps create a serious academic atmosphere. The uniform standards can reduce peer pressure, bullying based on clothing, and can promote a sense of equality. This can be a visible symbol of discipline. Additionally, having clear guidelines can help prevent gang-related symbols, offensive attire, or inappropriate grooming choices that may spark conflict or cause distractions to the classroom. However, many students, particularly teenagers like myself, use their appearance to express identity, culture, and personal beliefs. When the grooming policy becomes too strict, some people who, for example, wear locks for religious reasons or cultural reasons may feel targeted and may see a reason to rebel and cause conflict. Which brings me to my next point, school violence. If we really look at the root of school violence and look at it on a deeper level, we will see bullying, emotional stress, broken homes, lack of counseling support, and peer pressure. It becomes clear that a haircut or a uniform will not fix these problems. The grooming policy may help maintain order on the surface, but that is not the solution to violence. Discipline stems from respect, understanding, and positive relationships between students and teachers. In order to address school violence, the school needs to invest in mental health resources and conflict resolution classes. With these fundamental skills that they will be learning, this can reduce school violence. All in all, school grooming policy has its place, but it must implement flexibility and cultural sensitivity because grooming can shape your appearance, but only understanding and compassion shape your behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Amari Webb from the Dayton Griffith School.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amari Webb. I'm 13 years old and I'm running for BNC First Vice President. In my view, the direction this policy has taken is not only necessary but long overdue. Grooming in school should absolutely be a priority. Students should be clean, tidy, and presentable. But while neatness matters, we must separate it from the outdated belief that natural black hairstyles, long natural nails, or personal expressions cause indiscipline or violence. Some argue that relaxing grooming rules has led to a rise in school violence. With respect, I disagree. The real issues lie far beyond a student's hair, are the earrings they wear, or the shoelaces they wear. So what is the public's attitude to the grooming policy and violence, especially in school? Many people still connect hair and appearance to bad behavior, but we are ignoring the bigger picture. Just 2 weeks ago, a 13-year-old boy near Shonington lost his life to a stray bullet. That didn't happen because of a hairstyle. It happened because our communities are dealing with crime. Some students, including myself, are afraid to walk home or even go out with friends because of the violence in the streets. That's the reality. There are children in this country who live in fear every day. That fear isn't caused by braids or the color in my hair. It's caused by what's happening outside of school. Gun violence, toxic online influences, and a lot of positive role models in some of our schools. What are the stakeholders and agencies' views on this policy and how it impacts education? I acknowledge President Rudy Lovell from the Barbados Union of Teachers. He believes the grooming policy has contributed in discipline, and I understand his concerns, but that's not a grooming problem. It's an issue of enforcing standards fairly. On the other hand, Paula Annie Moore supported this policy because it promotes self-acceptance and cultural pride, and I agree. Our natural hair isn't the problem, it's our society's mindset that needs to shift. And finally, what is my position as a student's representative and BNC candidate? I am the first vice president of my school, deputy head of the public relations committee, and the front cat of my class. As a young leader, I decided to run for first vice president because I am determined, dedicated, and passionate to make a change in Students' Council. We can and must expect students to be neat and respectful, but that doesn't mean cutting our hair to follow outdated rules. It doesn't mean erasing our culture. In conclusion, let's stop pointing fingers at afros, plaits, or earrings and start pointing them at the real problems: the rising violence on our streets, the glorified crime on social media, and the fear that too many young people live with every day. Clean nails don't cause chaos, people do. The grooming policy is not perfect, but it's not the enemy. Let's stop blaming cultural expression and start addressing the real threats to our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. I'll now invite Azalea Lashley of the Ellerslie School.
Good afternoon to all. Today we examine whether grooming policies, particularly in Barbados, should be framed as issues of student discipline or student violence. I believe grooming policies were designed to uphold discipline and school identity, but in practice, some of these policies have caused harm, exclusion, and psychological violence to students, especially those embracing natural or cultural styles. Therefore, the issues demands a more balanced, cultural sensitive approach. Institutional violence and exclusions. In Barbados, there have been real cases where students were punished or barred for dreadlocks, afros, and even beards. My opinion on that point, I think that before the grooming policy even came into place, that children can wear hairdos with extensions and show their actual true expressions and show who they are and express themselves properly. Before it even came into place, children could not wear their dreadlocks, could not show their natural hairstyles and express who they are properly. And I think that since the grooming policy has came into place and put into place properly, I think that they can express themselves more better and show who they truly are. Not because people are telling them what they can wear and what they can't. These policies are often reflect Eurocentric beauty standards, which can be viewed as a form of cultural violence. My personal opinion, I think that showing your true beauty on who you are, I don't think that it causes violence. Depends on the type of household you live in or the type of neighborhood. Personally, I think that violence are how you act, the way you act in public settings. I think that starts in households, and I think parents should always try to treat children with care and kind and show them who they, so that they can express themselves. Students may feel dehumanized when punished for expressing their identity, especially when the grooming does not affect learning. I kind of agree on that, but it depends on how you raise your child, in my opinion. Hairstyles doesn't really affect learning, in my opinion. It kind of doesn't, because some children have this picture focus and they have their own dreams to chase, and I think that since they're chasing their own dreams, they don't care about hairstyles, they don't care about how they look, in my opinion. Some care about the fashion, the braids, the glam, the life, and they make sure that distracts them and keep them above and focused. This is kind of a bias or kind of normal topic that I think some parents should have a way and a rule
so that their children will know not what not to do and what hairstyles not to get. Real reference, the controversy over Rastafarian students being told to cut their locks or remove head wraps. Point 3. Call for reform and balance. The Ministry of Education in Barbados has acknowledged the need for grooming policies to be updated and more inclusive. Sorry about that. I think that it's to keep children in line and so that they won't go over or overstep. I don't think that the disciplinary rules and regulations for students, I think that saves them a lot of time. But at the end of the day, some people or some children may think that that's all that they have is their looks and hairstyles. Rather than blanket bans, grooming rules should focus on hygiene and safety, not controlling appearance. Hygiene should always be normal and taught from young on how to care and take care of themselves. Learn the basic needs of what they need to do and what they need to buy and what they need to use for their type of odor or body shape. Because everyone is built different from others. Some may have different body shapes and some are being bullied for that. But parents should always teach their children what not to use and how to use the products properly. And in schools, I think that should be enforced even more on bringing school the necessities that you need. And I think that it should be more in play. Cultural sensitivity, training and student involvement in policy making can reduce conflict and improve discipline without violence, which is true. A lot of parents think that violence is caused because of hairstyles, children being extravagant with different types of hairstyles and want to be loud, but that's just how some children learn to express themselves through hairstyles and how the way they dress. But I think that it could improve certain aspects of the learning structure and the learning environment, and I think it can make a kind of better change on how some children and how some teachers think about students and how they act. Quote, Barbados context. Our schools must reflect our identity, not erase it. Closing statement. In Barbados, grooming policy walk a fine line. While they serve a purpose in maintaining discipline, they can easily become tools of exclusion and emotional harm. It's time we shift from outdated colonized-minded policies to rules that respect identity, encourage dialogue, and preserve dignity. Discipline should not come at the cost of a student's culture or self-worth. Thank you.
And thank you. I can guarantee you that in the plenary session, I am going to have some questions for you based on the submissions you are making. I now invite Ms. Natalia Blades from the Ellerslie School to give her submission.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator and fellow candidates. The views of many people is that the grooming policy is good and it deals with deviant behaviors of students. The grooming policy can help students develop or help them when they're going into the workplace.
Because we all know workplaces have dress codes. The grooming policy teaches them how to look and how to carry themselves. I think that students are not educated on the national grooming policy enough. And some students may think that because they don't know the policy, if they don't know the policy, how can they dress or follow the guidelines of the policy? If students don't know the policy and don't know the guidelines, how can they follow them? I think my suggestion is that either we have a roundtable event to teach students about the grooming policy and make sure they understand how the grooming policy can impact them in the future, meaning going into the workforce. Now, my other point is that the elaborate hairstyles that students are wearing to school. Teachers tell students to wrap up their hair because it is too long. Now, students may be behind the students. So if they wrap their hair in a high one, not all of them are wrapping their hair in a high one, but it will block the students that are behind them from seeing the board. Some students that are behind them have to move to see the board clearly, which means that students are being disadvantaged from seeing the board and getting a proper education. Now, you're disadvantaging students and you're disadvantaging yourself when teachers have to constantly tell you to wrap up your hair. Teachers should not have to spend time on dealing with the hair issue. They should be spending time teaching. I think that the administration, in terms of the student leaders, teachers, and other stakeholders, should make sure that this policy is in place and it definitely needs to be reviewed. Students, all students within Barbados need to be made aware of this policy because it impacts all of us for the better or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shemaya Burgess, it is your turn.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, esteemed members of the Ministry Education Transformation, fellow candidates, and all those tuning in. I sit before you here today not just as a candidate for Vice President of the Barbados National Student Council, but as a student who has witnessed firsthand the challenges and conversations surrounding the Barbados National School Grooming Policy. This policy, designed to instill discipline and uphold national pride through standardized grooming and dress code, carries with it both strengths and shortcomings. While the intentions behind it may be noble, seeking to promote order, equality, and sense of identity, it is equally important that we ask at what cost. The connection between the grooming policy and student discipline is undeniable. When implemented fairly, it can foster unity and culture of respect. But when enforced rigidly or without context, it risks becoming a tool of exclusion, especially for students whose religion, cultural, religious, or personal expression may not be aligned with narrow standards. The recent rise in students' unrest and school violence should not be viewed in isolation. We must consider whether policies like these unintentionally contribute to feelings of repetition, frustration, and alienation. Uniformity should never come at the expense of individuality. The public's attitude reflects this complexity. Parents, educators, and students themselves are raising concerns. Why are we politicizing ourselves more harshly than we are addressing mental health? Why is a student sent home for their hair while others struggle silently with issues far deeper? The ministry has expressed its ongoing commitment to structure the discipline, to structure and discipline. I commend that. But discipline must be balanced with dialogue. And order must never silence the voices of those it is meant to serve. Leaders like Mr. Rodney Lovell of the Barbados Union Teachers have echoed the need for a more inclusive approach. As stakeholders in education, we cannot afford to ignore the lived realities of our students. So how do I respond? Not just as a candidate, but as a student representative. I believe in a student-centered review of the grooming policy, one that invites open conciliation with the very people it affects. I believe in redefining discipline not as a punishment, but as an understanding, respect, and accountability. And I believe that school environments should be places where expression and education could walk hand in hand. If elected as vice president, I will advocate for national dialogue on the grooming standards that respects our traditions, yes, but also embrace modern student voices. I will work to ensure policies do not just look good on paper, but feel fair in practice. Let us move beyond enforcement and towards empowerment. Let us lead with compassion, but never without courage. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I am now at Naomi Jordan of Harson's College. Yes, I do it deliberately. I went large.
Yeah, I heard, sir. Good afternoon, all. Grooming refers to the act of maintaining a clean and presentable appearance. Within schools, this is emphasized through the use of a uniform. In the context of school, grooming is a part of deportment and reflects you as an individual, but also your affiliation with the institution. Unity through dress is meant to incite a sense of belonging and pride within the student. And this is what the Barbados National School Grooming Policy aims to achieve. As with most things, there are positives and there are negatives. One of the benefits of the grooming policy is a sense of order and respect it fosters within the school environment. The grooming policy is being amended to ensure that there's no discrimination against boys with more Afro-based styles. But the Minister of Educational Transformation, Senator Chad Blackman, acknowledged that, quote, tidy to you may be untidy to another and vice versa. There has to be a middle ground that Barbados settles on, unquote. There are also serious disadvantages associated with the grooming policy. Many students have noted the blatant favoritism of their Caucasian and ethnic diverse counterparts. An article, including an interview with a UE student who experienced this favoritism, stated that
There used to be white boys at my old secondary school that would have their hair long. That creates an image and ideology that black isn't tidy. This widespread perception of vagueness in the Barbados National School Grooming Policy is shared by the Barbados Union of Teachers, whose president laments that we are advocating for it to be revised with clearer, more practical guidelines that ensure consistency and order in our schools. However, the notion that the enforcement of the grooming policy or lack thereof is the cause or catalyst for the rise in school violence and lack of student discipline oversimplifies the complexity of the situation. We have to look closer at the underlying issues that are impacting the students, inevitably contributing to these troubling trends. Truthfully, the gravity of the situation has led me to believe that this cannot all be attributed to the grooming policy. Home is where the heart is, as well as where the young mind is molded. As a nation, we have embraced technology to some extent, but the progress comes with challenges. Young children have access to and are exposed to violence and R-rated material from a young age. Violence is promoted by so many video games, TV shows, movies, songs, and books that a developing mind can interpret this as the status quo. This can lead some children to attribute a sense of normalcy towards violence as an opportunity to reenact those scenes. We have become so desensitized to it that we flip past headlines of shootings or stabbings without a second thought. This desensitization applies to the accessibility of recreational drugs, such as marijuana and alcohol, which according to the Barbados Children Directory are available to and used by children as young as 10 years old. Acting Director of Public Prosecutions, Alliston Seal, is firmly of the view that the rise in violent crime in Barbados is directly linked to the use of marijuana. He states that only 1% of the daily pre-sentence reports he receives involve offenders who have never used cannabis. 1%. Rejecting comparisons between cannabis and alcohol, he said the effects of marijuana are far more dangerous. Though in this context, the effect of psychotropic substances on the young mind are detrimental to their development as a young person. Young minds are influenced subconsciously by their surroundings and home situations. A child that is never given the opportunity to shine academically will find other ways to gain attention. Lack of early detection of learning disabilities push children to become rebellious as they try to distract from or cope with their inabilities in the classroom. This begins a vicious cycle of constantly being reminded of these inabilities as they're just labeled as dumpsy or disruptive. Without support, they can try to cope in more destructive ways, leading to violence. As I come to a close, as a student leader, I would like to urge the administration to pay greater attention to the many factors impacting the students' mental and emotional well-being within and outside of the school environment. Noting that the grooming policy is not a comprehensive solution, but rather one aspect of a much larger framework needed to address the challenges faced by students. While maintaining the standards of appearance has its merits, it is essential to recognize that it cannot resolve the deeper issues contributing to school violence, indiscipline, and emotional turmoil among students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Tanisha David from the Princess Margaret School.
Good afternoon, everyone. As said, my name is Tanisha David, and I am the president of the Princess Margaret Student Council, and I am running for National Student Council president. Today, I want to share a student's perspective on the National Grooming Policy. My position is this: the grooming policy should remain in place, but it needs to be improved. I believe it's a discipline issue, not a violence issue. And with fair, consistent enforcement and better communication, it can help build pride, respect, and unity among students without taking away their identity or voice. Let's begin with the purpose of the policy. The Ministry of Education introduced it with the intention of promoting neatness, discipline, and cultural identity in schools. The idea was to move away from outdated standards and allow students to feel more comfortable and seen, especially in a post-colonial society where cultural expression matters. Isn't that what we all want? to feel like we belong in a place where we learn and grow. But the problem lies in the inconsistent enforcement of the policy. According to Rudy Lavelle, president of the Barbados Union of Teachers, many educators are concerned about how the policy is being applied. He noted in the media that some teachers are uncertain about where the lines are drawn, and others feel unsupported when trying to uphold standards. In an article published by National News, Mr. Lavelle also linked the rise in classroom indiscipline to unclear grooming policies, saying, "We are seen in situations where students come to school with extreme hairstyles. When teachers question them, they are accused of being unfair or culturally insensitive." This shows the real issue isn't the policy itself, but the way it's being used. In some schools, grooming rules are enforced harshly. In others, they are barely managed or maintained. This sends mixed messages and causes students to feel like they're being unfairly singled out or judged. How can we expect students to follow rules when they don't feel clear or consistent? And when rules feel inconsistent or unexplained, students stop respecting them. As a student leader and a candidate for the Barbados National Student Council, I believe we need to strengthen the grooming policy, not scrap it. This means enforcing it fairly and consistently across all schools, educating both students and teachers about the purpose of the rules, and ensuring that these rules are respected through cultural expression and student identity. Because when students understand the why and feel heard, they are far more likely to respect the what. Change goes both ways. Parents should not support the wrongdoing of a child when they are being penalized for their hairstyles and appearance. As seen recently at my school, parents have been entering schools threatening teachers because of a child's wrongdoing, creating an unsafe environment for other students. School is a part of society, so that means some trends we see happening in society have appeared in schools, and this is a problem that we cannot stop. Some argue that the grooming policy is linked to an increase in violent or defiant behavior, but the Ministry of Education's own statement published in Barbados today clarifies that the statement was never invented to encourage violence or discrimination. Ministry of Education Kay McConney expressed that the Minister of Education Kay McConney expressed the need to create learning environments that reflect national identity while still maintaining standards. So yes, the grooming policy may influence the school climate, but it's not the root of violence. Often, violence and defiance in school come from deeper issues, such as feeling unheard, misunderstood, or disrespected. Can we really say a grooming rule causes violence, or is it how we respond to students that makes the difference? A grooming rule doesn't cause that, but how it is enforced can build trust or break it. I also want to acknowledge how grooming rules affect teacher-student relationships. When a teacher has to enforce unclear or unfair rules, it can create tension on both sides. Don't our teachers deserve clear support? Just like we do. Teachers deserve support and clarity too. So in closing, I support the grooming policy, but it needs to be fair, consistent, and student inclusive. It should help us build discipline, not division. It should reflect who we are as Barbadians, whilst also reminding us that school is a place of growth, respect, and unity. Let's improve the policy, not remove it, and make sure every student, every teacher, and every school feels respected in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for Mr. Young from Queen's College.
So good afternoon. As Mr. Jackmo said, my name is Javar Young. I attend the Queen's College School. I'm the president of the Queen's College Student Council, as well as the former general secretary of the Barbados National Student Council. Now, some of us in here would have remembered that the Minister of Education would have met with us about 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, at the Lloyd Erskine Center Center, because he said that he wanted to come to us and have a conversation and see where we were at, and obviously start building that relationship back up, because the ministers would have changed. Before he got into the actual session with us, a lot of us did not know, but he had done an interview where he had said that he was going to look at revising the policy because there was a lot of public outcry about it. Now, I was on Brass Stacks like 2 or 3 weeks before that, and I went on and we were talking about a lot of different things. I was on as a guest panelist, and some persons, especially persons of the older generation, were calling and they were mentioning it. I remember one man said he can't tell with the primary school who's a boy and who's a girl. I remember it was a whole lot that they were saying, but I could tell that the number one thing at the center of this entire fiasco is that there's a generational gap. The other thing that I think needs to be mentioned, especially given what the topic is there needs to be differentiation of causation and correlation. Just because two things look as if they're related, it doesn't mean that one thing caused the other. So just because we are seeing violence in schools, it does not mean that that can be directly attributed to the fact that there's a national grooming policy. As I wrote here, just because the sky is purple one day, it doesn't mean that that's the reason why you're sick. And I know it's a crazy example, but I think we need to understand that when we move forward, when we talk about crime and violence in society. Because the way that I see it, it seems to me that stakeholders are just trying to find an issue to pin the actual problems that young people are facing and blame it for all things that are going wrong. And as I would have said, and as I would like to say again, I haven't seen any research anywhere that has ever implied that the way that you carry that the way that you wear your hair, or the way that you have anything to do with grooming, to be honest. I haven't seen any research that directly implicates that that might necessarily impact how you learn. What I will say, and as Naomi would have said, there's a reason why we have uniforms. The reason for that is because we recognize that we're in a society that's diverse. Not everybody has the resources. And we obviously don't want students coming to school and feeling as if they're less than or they're better than because they might be able to afford better clothing. So that's the reason why we have uniforms. And I'm not at all against that. In fact, as Mr. Jackman would have said when we started, that is fundamental in the policy. There should not be any deviation from the actual school uniform. But what we find ourselves debating is hairstyles. And not just hairstyles, we find ourselves debating things that are not even considered in the policy. Things such as girls wearing eyelashes, girls having makeup on, nothing to that effect was ever brought up in the policy other than saying it is not allowed. In fact, when I went on Brass Tacks on Tuesday, the first clip that decided to pick of me is when it was named the things that are not allowed instead of the grooming policy. It is very strict, it is very clear. The grooming policy is not vague, it says what it's about, it says what it allows, and it says what the requirements are. And this is where I will have to hop on to what one of the candidate from Princess Margaret have said. The problem with the policy is not the policy, the problem is the implementation. As I would have said before, if you put a law in place and the police don't enforce it, well then what was the point? If you put a policy in place and then you send children to school and you let them do as they please, are you going to blame the policy or are you going to blame the lack of enforcement? I also want to move on and speak specifically about the cultural impact of this issue. In the short story, George and them, they're United States, which some of us will study at CSAT. The main character sister refers to the wig as the black woman's "Good morning, white America, how are you?" Back in those days, black women wore blonde wigs that were straight, that you could tell was not their natural hair, and they still do today, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. What I'm saying is, for too long, black persons have tried to conform to this white perception of what we should do, how we should present ourselves, and how we should express ourselves. The reality is that we did not come from Europe. We did not come from North America. We were brought here against our will on slave ships, made to work on plantations for 200 to 400 years. I can't remember the exact amount of time, but for a very long time. And then even after that, we were then subjugated to essentially being treated as the lowest class in society and being forced to work jobs that the whites would never do. And let's not pretend that colonialism is over. It still continues to this day. In fact, part of the reason why the policy had to come about is because you would go into secondary schools and see children of particular races wearing their hair as they pleased. But God forbid the black boy had his hair over that 2 or 3 inches of length that was allowed. It was a problem. If you want to talk about building a society that's inclusive, I mean, we are going through education transformation. The catchphrase or the acronym is FIRM. One that is fair, one that is inclusive, one that is relevant, one that is modern. If we want to be inclusive, we have to allow children to express themselves. We have to be inclusive of different cultural forms. I think as youth advocates, as student advocates, we need to remember who we represent. Remember what we represent. We don't represent the interest of the BUT. We don't represent the interests of BAPS, we represent the interests of students. And we have to realize that the persons who represent those organizations are persons who are 20, 30, 40 years older than us. I am not saying that because they're older, it means we need to throw away their perspectives. I think it means that we need to see how this issue actually impacts us and what correlation it has to, once again, the topic of debate, crime and violence. I think it has none. My final point will be this. If the stereotype is that because somebody might have their hair in braids, a boy might have his hair in braids, that directly correlates to crime and violence, that is a problem. That is a post-colonial mindset. In my opinion, that's racism. Because it tells me that our perception of a good black man is someone who wears his hair in a way that is short and in a way that conforms to what the white person told us that we had to do. That is my perspective on the issue. So to close and to make my final point, the issue is implementation. The issue is enforcement. The issue is not the policy. And to go and revise the policy in any way, like I would have also said on brass stats, in any way that takes away its liberties, would be detrimental overall. I think that what we need to do is to look at the policy, read the policy. The policy is there. It's not as if the policy is not public. It is public information. And based on that, stakeholders, teachers, administrators, parents, even us as young people, we have a part to play, have to do what's necessary to ensure that we are able to keep these few liberties that this policy has allowed us and how we can express ourselves while still going to school and obviously doing what we're supposed to do at school, and that is learning. Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. Now, Shakir Daisley from the Senators Boys.
Good afternoon. I am Shakir Daisley. I will be running for the position of Vice President for the Barbados National Student Council. Today, I stand before you to speak on a topic that affects not just how we look, but how we are judged. The national grooming policy has sparked much conversation across Barbados, and I feel it's time to address the issue not just from a place of policy, but from a place of truth. Let me begin with my own reality. Like many young men and women across this country, I choose to wear my hair in a way that reflects who I am, whether it's plaits, cornrows, or afros. But for too often, hairstyles like mine are looked down on. People see them and immediately think bad behavior, troublemaker, or unruly. But let me ask this. Since when did a hairstyle define someone's character? The truth is the stigma is real. I've seen it. I felt it. Some teachers, some employers, even members of the public still cling to outdated beliefs that someone who wears their hair reflects their worth or discipline. But we are not our hair. We are our actions, our intentions, our talents, and our contributions to this society. When the national grooming policy was introduced, it was meant to create uniformity, discipline, and professional appearance in our schools. But somewhere along the way, it started to alienate instead of include. It started to marginalize instead of uplift. The president of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Rudy Lovell, acknowledged this. He expressed that while discipline and order are important, the policy must be also realistic and culturally sensitive. He pointed that students should not be punished or excluded because of hairstyles that reflect their identity, religion, or culture. And I agree. How can we teach pride in being Barbadian while policing the very things that make us uniquely Caribbean? The education officer, Joy Adamson, emphasized that point, that the policy was not meant to discriminate, but to promote readiness for the world of work. But here's the question. Here's the question we need to ask ourselves. What kind of world are we preparing students for? one where individuality is suppressed, or one where people are judged by their character and performance. The public's reaction has been mixed. Some support the policy, fully believing it encourages discipline. Others, especially youth and more progressive voices, believes it's time for change. Social media lit up with opinions, while many asking why we still hold on to colonial ideals of what is neat or acceptable. Is a child's learning really affected by whether we have braids, curls, or a low cut? What I believe is this: grooming should be about hygiene, not conformity. It should be about presenting yourself with pride, not about not about fitting to a mold that doesn't reflect who you are. Respect doesn't come from how you wear your hair, but also how you treat others and how you carry yourself. We need policies that reflect culture, identity, and diversity of Barbados. Policies that encourage students to be their best selves, not just not their most polished versions of someone else's idea of perfection. So I say this to the decision makers: listen to the voices of the youth. We are the future, and we deserve to say and how we present ourselves to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Jaden Walker from the St. Leonard's Boys School.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jalen Walker, and I'll be running for the position of General Secretary for the BNSC. Well, the National Student Council Grooming Policy has been admired for its inclusivity. Concerns have been raised regarding its potential impact on student discipline and school violence. Some argue that by relaxing grooming standards, we risk eroding the discipline that uniformity purportedly brings, potentially leading to increased instances of misconduct. However, it is essential to scrutinize this assumption. Discipline is a multifaceted construct influenced by a myriad of factors beyond mere appearance. Respect, responsibility, and behavioral norms are cultivated through comprehensive educational strategies. Positive reinforcements and open communication between educators and students attributing discipline permit the grooming standards oversimplifies the complexities of student behavior. Furthermore, equating non-traditional or natural hairstyles with indiscipline is a reflection of ingrained biases rather than objective reality. By allowing students the freedom to wear hairstyles that resonate with their cultural identity, we are not promoting disorder, but rather encouraging self-expression within reasonable boundaries. This approach can enhance self-esteem and in turn foster a more respectful and cohesive student body. Regarding school violence, it is reductive to suggest that grooming policies alone can mitigate such incidents. Violence in schools is often symptomatic of broader societal issues, including economic disparities, familial challenges, and community tensions. Addressing these root causes requires holistic interventions that extend beyond the purview of grooming standards. In essence, while maintaining a standard of dress and appearance is important, it should not come at the expense of cultural expressions or be misinterpreted as the cornerstone of discipline. True discipline emanates from mutual respect, understanding, and the cultivation of an environment where students feel valued and heard. The National School Grooming Policy is in its current form strives to balance these elements, and it is incum- incumbent incumbent upon us to support its implementation with an open mind and a commitment to equity. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Sarah Odell.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Odell, and I am president of the Michael School Student Council, and I am running for president of the Barbados National Student Council. Ladies and gentlemen, Is the 2023 grooming policy really the issue, or are we missing the bigger picture? For the first time, we're seeing a policy that actually pushes back against colonial standards, not upholds them. Historically, grooming rules in schools were designed to suppress Afro-Caribbean identity, forcing students to fit into Eurocentric ideas of what was neat, professional, or presentable. But this policy signifies something different. It affirms that natural black hair, in all its textures, styles, and expression, is not just acceptable but worthy. We're no longer living in a time where straight hair is the only standard of beauty or professionalism. Barbados is evolving, and our education system must evolve with it. It must reflect the freedom, the pride, and the power of black identity in its truest form. As such, the grooming policy was a step in the right direction. It allows for natural hair, neat expression, neat extensions, and even makes school more affordable by permitting solid black sneakers. That's progress. Now let me be honest, the policy is not perfect, and I'm not pretending that it's a solution for every issue within our schools. But to say it's the reason for rising in discipline and violence within schools, that's a stretch. No matter what any policy says, there will always be students who push boundaries. That doesn't make the policy invalid, it just means we need to focus on consistent and fair implementation. When Rudy Lavelle, president of Barbados Union of Teachers, said that it isn't a calling for the policy to be scrapped, but rather they're asking for clearer guidelines, this is something I can hear and I can stand behind as a person for progression. The issue is not the spirit of the policy itself, but how schools are applying it and how parents are policing their children. Instead of making it work, we attack the first form of progress and link it to indiscipline that has been prevalent and showing itself for years upon years. We can't sit here and casually say that this policy has fostered such a thing when the root of the problem is deeper than anything that a policy can make happen. It is rooted in homes and community structures. We are still attacking the policy not because it's failing, but because persons are uncomfortable with what it represents: freedom, cultural expression, and equity, something that goes against what was the norm decades ago. Paula Ann Moore from the group of concerned parents said it best. This policy encouraged cultural acceptance. That matters, especially for young people who are growing up in a world that too often tells them that their natural identity isn't good enough. Let us here today truly reflect on the fact that we are still instilling in the minds of our children that their hair is a distraction and it must be cut or straightened to be deemed as clean and proper. Why are we continuing to enforce colonial rules in 2025? Why don't we continue to teach our students how to have true pride in their natural hair while being respectful to the rules and having neat, tidy, beautiful hairstyles? So, instead of fighting the policy, we should be fighting the inconsistency, the bias, and the outdated mindset that still lingers within our schools. Let's engage parents meaningfully in the spirit of this policy. Let's ensure that the students understand the role of the policy in their lives and need to appreciate the rules that accompany it. Let us stop turning cultural identity into a discipline issue. This grooming policy is not the villain, it's a platform, a foundation, and a beginning. Let's not tear it down, but let's implement it better and build something stronger on top of it. Thank you.
Student leadership is important in the system that we are trying to create in Barbados, and I'm happy to see so many young people coming forward and presenting themselves for national leadership roles.
Thank you.